Donald Trump and the staggering fine. A judge in New York fining Trump $355 million in his civil fraud case for exaggerating the value of his properties, defrauding lenders by inflating the values of his properties for years to get better and bigger loans and insurance deals. The state attorney general had argued if everyday Americans can't exaggerate the values of their properties, why should the Trumps? One property, the Trump Tower penthouse, Trump documents claimed it was 30,000 square feet. Property records show it's actually 10,900 square feet. Mar-a-Lago, Trump said it was worth up to $600 million. Appraisers in Florida put it at $27 million, just a fraction of Trump's claim.
You ever notice how when someone says it's not about the money, it's almost always about the money? Same with power. When someone insists this isn't political, you can bet your last rupee. It's political. See, in real life, nobody seizes your house or business just to make a point. But in politics, the line between justice and spectacle gets blurry, fast. And when that line is crossed, the implications aren't just about one man or one case. They're about all of us, about what happens when the system wants to make an example out of someone. And recently, the system got very close to making Donald Trump that example. But how close is too close? Let's break it down. Donald Trump didn't just run for president as a politician. He ran as a businessman, a titan of industry, the guy whose name was etched in gold on skyscrapers. He said it in interviews, on stage, in debates. Nobody knows the system better than me. He promised voters that his business savvy would translate into fixing America, negotiating better deals, cutting waste, and restoring prosperity. That brand, the image of the tough, brilliant dealmaker, wasn't just campaign marketing. It was a promise. A walking guarantee. And whether you loved or hated him, one thing was clear. His empire was proof of concept, until the state of New York decided to test that proof. On February 2024, New York Attorney General Letitia James made a statement that echoed like a warning shot. If Trump didn't pay a nearly $454 million civil judgment, she was coming for his properties, and not just any properties. Trump Tower, 40 Wall Street, the iconic real estate that's defined his public persona for decades. And this wasn't some backroom threat. She went on national TV and said it, on record. We will seek judgment enforcement mechanisms in court. Translated, we'll take his stuff. At the same time, the court released a blistering ruling. Trump, they said, had exaggerated the value of his assets by billions to get better loans, better insurance deals, and better terms, all while allegedly downplaying those same values when it came to taxes. And the judge didn't buy the excuses. In fact, the judgment wasn't just about the money, it was about credibility. And the court made it clear, Trump's wasn't intact. But hold that thought, because the real story begins when the deadline hit. Here's what the court found. And it's not vague. Trump inflated his net worth by billions, not once, not by accident, but consistently over years. One building would be claimed to be worth $500 million when applying for a loan, and $50 million when reporting taxes. That's not creative accounting. That's called fraud. In normal cases, civil fraud penalties mean fines or repayment, but this wasn't a normal case. The judgment, $454 million plus daily interest until paid. And if Trump didn't pay, the state had every legal right to enforce the judgment through asset seizure. Yes, that's real. Yes, that's legal. Letitia James made it public. If Trump didn't pay or post a bond, Trump Tower was fair game. So what did Trump do? He scrambled. His legal team ran to the appeals court asking for relief, saying the amount was impossible to post. And then, with hours to spare before enforcement began, a deal was cut. Trump could post a reduced bond, $175 million, to delay enforcement while he appealed. Just in time, literally hours before sheriffs could have started locking down his buildings. But now here's the question no one's asking. If he's worth billions, why couldn't he cover it? Let's shift focus. While this drama played out in Manhattan courtrooms, ordinary Americans, workers, business owners, families were watching something disturbingly familiar, a system that plays by different rules depending on who you are. Now, on paper, this was accountability. A judge ruled. A penalty was set. No one is above the law. But here's the other side. If Trump wasn't a political lightning rod, would this level of enforcement have been pursued this aggressively? Would the state really have moved to seize skyscrapers, broadcasted across national media? Meanwhile, small businesses dealing with IRS audits, bank foreclosures, or regulatory fines. They don't get last-minute reprieves. They don't get primetime coverage. They just lose everything quietly. The difference? They don't have the name, the lawyers, or the enemies Trump does. In other words, whether you support Trump or despise him, you saw what happens when the system really wants to make an example out of someone. And if they can do that to him, let's be honest, there's a credibility gap here, and it's not just about Trump, it's about the system itself. On one hand, we're told this was about justice, about fraud and the rule of law. On the other hand, we have an attorney general who campaigned on going after Trump, not investigating, going after. We have a judgment so severe that even bond companies were hesitant to touch it. A seizure threat so dramatic, it would have set a precedent rarely, if ever, seen in modern American history. So you tell me, is this about fraud or about humiliation? Is the system upholding justice or staging a warning? And if the rules only seem to bite when the target is unpopular, are they really rules or weapons? This isn't about defending Trump. It's about asking, who's next? Because selective enforcement isn't justice. It's a signal. And right now, that signal is loud. Remember how we started? When someone says, it's not about the money, it's probably about the money. Well, in this case, when officials say, no one is above the law, maybe we should ask, who decides when the law applies? Trump was hours away from losing his empire, not because of a war or a recession or a market collapse, but because the system turned its full weight on him and nearly crushed him. Whether that was justice or vengeance depends on your point of view. But what's undeniable is this. The old belief that some people are untouchable is fading. And that might sound good, until you realize how quickly that power can be used, not to protect the public, but to punish the inconvenient. So don't just scroll past this. Like the video if you believe accountability should apply equally, not selectively. Comment below. Do you think this was justice or political theater? Share this with someone who thinks they know the full story. And if you want more calm, sharp, truth-first breakdowns, subscribe now. Because in a world full of spin, someone needs to say what's actually happening. And we're just getting started.